The snow falls like a curse that cannot be erased. Silent. Relentless. Swallowing everything in its path. A 7-year-old girl runs through the night, her bare feet leaving prints in the white that vanish almost as quickly as she passes. Emma. Her name is Emma and she is crying so hard she cannot breathe. The pink nightgown her mother bought her 3 years ago is all she wears, nothing else, just the thin fabric and her skin and the wind that cuts through her like a blade through paper. She does not know where she is running. She only knows she must run. 3 miles behind her, in a warehouse that smells like rust and concrete and things that should have stayed buried, Aria Sinclair lies on a concrete floor with handprint bruises darkening across her throat. One eye is swollen shut. Her left cheekbone is split open. She cannot move. She is not sure she is still breathing. But 3 miles ahead, on a deserted stretch of highway where the snow has buried the asphalt and the wind howls like something dying, that is where everything changes. That is where a delivery driver in a grey uniform and a torn jacket, a woman with exactly $78 to her name, makes a choice that will rewrite the lives of everyone who matters. Aria Sinclair does not belong on this highway. Her 2004 Honda Civic with the check engine light that has been on for 2 years gives a sound like something breaking and then stops. Just stops. The engine dies. The headlights dim. The radio cuts to nothing but the sound of wind pressing against metal and glass. She sits in the darkness for exactly 42 seconds before she understands. This is not just a breakdown. The temperature outside is 12 degrees. The blizzard that sealed all the highways into and out of Los Angeles is getting worse, not better. And she has no cell signal. No blanket. No emergency kit. She has the uniform she wears for her delivery job at Giovanni's Italian restaurant on 5th Street, where she makes $7 an hour plus whatever tips the wealthy people in the hills feel generous enough to leave, which is almost never. She has the $78 in her jacket pocket. She has the grandmother's recipe book wedged beneath the passenger seat, the one with fading notes in the margins in handwriting she will never be able to write again because the person who held that pen died 13 years ago. She has memories and exhaustion and a deadline that arrives in 7 days. 7 days until she loses Emma to the system. The social worker's words still sit in her chest like a stone. $35,000. That is what she needs. $35,000 to pay the back rent on the apartment where Emma sleeps in a converted closet, where Aria has worked 14-hour days for 3 years as a live-in nanny for a family whose children will never truly be hers, where she pours everything she has into keeping a roof over the head of a girl who is not her daughter but is her everything. $35,000 or Emma goes into the system. Into foster care. Into the hands of strangers who do not know that she is afraid of the dark. That she still wets the bed sometimes and needs a night light in the shape of a moon. That she draws pictures of people leaving and asks Aria over and over, "You will not leave me like mommy left me, right? You will stay." Aria sits in the Civic as the snow buries it. She does not cry. Her tears ran out somewhere on a Greyhound bus 3 years ago when she realized that the only job she could find paid less than the cost of a studio apartment. Then the lights appear. They materialize from the whiteness like something from a nightmare. For black SUVs, all of them massive, all of them moving in perfect formation, their headlights cutting through the blizzard like knives. They slow as they approach her disabled car. They do not stop. They begin to circle. Aria's hands grip the steering wheel. She has heard stories in the restaurant, whispered conversations between wealthy clients who thought delivery drivers could not hear. Stories about black SUVs that appear in the middle of the night. Stories about people who climb into those vehicles and are never seen again. The middle SUV stops. A man emerges from the passenger side and the cold seems to freeze even the wind. He is tall, perhaps 6'2", with a build that suggests violence not as something he commits but as something he is. His coat is made of cashmere the color of midnight, worth more than everything Aria has owned in her entire life. Beneath it, she can see the edge of a tailored suit in black, a white shirt opened just enough to show a chest that has absorbed punishment and emerged unscathed. His face is carved from something harder than bone. His eyes are dark as wet stone, This man is not here to help. He walks toward her car with movements that are deliberate, measured, each step controlled like a general surveying a battlefield. Behind him, 2 other men follow. One is built like a tank with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. The other is lean and precise, with the posture of someone who has been trained to kill and has done so without hesitation. The man in the cashmere coat reaches her window. Taps on it. Once. Aria rolls the window down even though every instinct tells her not to. Every instinct tells her to lock the doors and pretend she is not here, that this is happening to someone else, that she does not exist. But existing is what she has learned to do. Existing quietly. Existing invisibly. Car trouble. His voice is deep and solid like an oath, with an accent that carries the weight of 1,000 old stories. Engine died, Aria says. Her voice sounds like a whisper, barely audible over the wind. You are far from anywhere. He says this as a statement of fact, not concern. He looks at her uniform, at the Giovanni's logo on the chest pocket, at her hands gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles are white. You work in the city and broke down out here. Making a delivery. This is the truth. She had a delivery in the hills, to a home where she was not supposed to use the front entrance and was not offered water and was tipped in coins, literally coins, by a woman whose jewelry cost more than the car Aria was driving. Roads were clear when I left. Roads are not clear now, the man says. He pauses. We can give you a ride into the city. Or we can call someone for your car. This is a test. Aria can feel it. There is no right answer here. Getting into a black SUV with men who move like trained weapons is not survival. It is capitulation. But staying in a car that will become her tomb in this blizzard is also not survival. Before she can decide, the man's hand moves to his chest. It happens in absolute silence. His face goes white. Not the white of cold, but the white of something leaving. His hand presses against his sternum and he staggers backward, his knees bending, his body beginning to fall. The men behind him lunge forward, but they are too slow. Their boss is collapsing onto the snow-covered highway and neither of them knows what is happening because this is not something that happens. This is not something Alindro Bianchi does. He does not fall. He does not collapse. He does not gasp like a man drowning in air. Call an ambulance. The tank-sized man, Bruno, is on his phone, but the signal out here is worse than death. There is nothing. No connection. Nothing. The lean man, Nino, is frozen, his training inadequate for this moment because his training never accounted for his boss being human. For his boss being fragile. For his boss being mortal. Aria does not think. She moves. She is out of the car, her shoes hitting the snow, the cold like a slap against her skin. She runs toward the collapsing man and Bruno reaches for his gun, his muscle memory overriding everything else, his hand moving toward the weapon because she is a threat and threats get eliminated. But he is slow. He is panicking. He is not thinking. Stop right there. Bruno's voice cracks with something that might be desperation. Aria ignores him. She reaches the man in the cashmere coat, Alindro Bianchi, though she does not know this name yet, and she grabs his shoulder and she rotates him and she pulls back her fist. Her small fist. Her fragile fist. Her fist that counts tips and sorts coins and holds Emma's hand as she walks her to school every morning before her shift at the restaurant begins. She slams it into his chest with everything she has. A precordial thump. She learned this 3 years ago in an EMT certification class that she took but never finished because she could not afford to complete it. She learned this and then never used it because she works in food service and counts money she does not have and tries not to think about how many years until she can afford a studio apartment alone, much less with a child. But she learned it. And her body remembers. The man gasps. His eyes go wide. His back arches. His hand grabs her arm so hard she feels it will snap, but this is better than not grabbing anything. This is better than the nothing that was claiming him a moment ago. His heart beats. Not smoothly. Not peacefully. But it beats. His lungs pull in air like he is drowning, and air is water and he must drink it to survive. His dark eyes focus. He looks up at her. At her torn jacket. At her grey delivery uniform. At her face that shows every hard year of survival. And he whispers one sentence. "Who are you?" Aria's breathing is ragged. Her hands are shaking. Behind her, she hears Bruno lowering his weapon, the metal clicking against the holster. She hears Nino exhaling like a man who has just come back from being dead. She looks at the most feared man in Los Angeles and she tells him the only truth she knows. A delivery driver with $78 to my name. The man does not smile. But something in his dark eyes shifts. Something cold and dangerous and absolutely inevitable. He is still holding her arm. His grip loosens but does not release. He looks at her like he is seeing something he cannot name. Like he is looking at a mirror and seeing his own reflection staring back. "What is your name?" "Aria. Aria Sinclair." He closes his eyes for a moment. When he opens them again, she sees something in them that frightens her more than the black SUVs or the men with guns or the blizzard that is burying them all alive. She has just punched Alindro Bianchi back to life. She has just made a choice that will pull her into a war she does not understand. A war where the sides are already drawn. A war where the only person she has ever loved hangs in the balance. But she does not know this yet. She only knows that this man's heart is beating against her palm, and somewhere 3 miles away, a 7-year-old girl in a pink nightgown is still running through the snow, screaming a name that no one is answering. And she knows that she has exactly 7 days left. Before we continue, if this story hits you, drop a like. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you don't miss what is coming tomorrow. Now let us go back. Back to 3 days before Aria punched a man back to life on a deserted highway. Back to the day when she still had time. Back to when Emma still believed that her mother might come back and that Aria would stay and that love was enough to keep a roof over both their heads. Back to a Tuesday morning that looked like every other Tuesday morning, when Aria woke at 5 o'clock in a room so small that she could touch both walls if she stretched out her arms. The alarm on Aria's phone screamed at 5:16 in the morning, and she was awake before the second beep finished. There was no grogginess, no slow climb toward consciousness. 7 years of starting before dawn had trained her body to snap into motion like a switch flipped in the dark. Her eyes opened on the ceiling 3 feet above her head in the converted walk-in closet of the Lancaster family's Westwood mansion, that 6-by-8-foot room with the single hanging bulb and the twin mattress on the floor and the plastic laundry basket holding everything she owned in the world. She did not stretch. The walls were too close. Instead, she rolled out of bed and pulled on the black pants and white blouse hanging on the nail behind the door. The blouse smelled like the industrial detergent from the laundromat on Sunset Boulevard, the one that cost $3 a load and where she washed everything on Sunday nights when the machines were cheapest. She tied her dark brown hair back with a rubber band, splashed cold water on her face from the sink in the corner, and by 5:58 she was moving down the narrow hallway toward the kitchen. The mansion breathed around her like a sleeping animal. 32 rooms. 7 bathrooms with marble counters. Imported Italian tile. A chandelier in the foyer that cost more than Aria would earn in 3 years. And in this house, in this temple of wealth, she was a ghost who cooked breakfast. The kitchen was all stainless steel and white subway tile. Everything gleamed. Nothing was warm. Aria pulled eggs from the refrigerator, butter, milk, the good bread that only the family ate. She cracked eggs into a bowl, 12 of them, because the children would eat eggs and toast and fruit and she would eat what was left on their plates. This was the unspoken arrangement. This was what $2,300 a month bought. Room, board, and the scraps of other people's meals. By 6:15 the kitchen smelled like cinnamon and butter. This was when the phone started ringing. The caller ID showed a blocked number. Aria did not answer. She knew what they wanted. She knew the voice on the other end would be clipped and professional and utterly without mercy. Debt collectors had a sound. They had a rhythm. This was the fourth call this week. The mortgage on her car was 12 months behind. The surgery bills from 2019 were still outstanding. The medical debt from her grandmother's final hospital stay was a number so large that Aria had stopped looking at the statements. She turned the phone face down on the counter and continued cooking. At 6:36, footsteps thundered down the stairs. Oliver arrived first, 9 years old, with his father's sharp eyes and his mother's indifference. He threw his backpack on the kitchen island without looking at her and sat down. Sophie followed at 6:51, already scowling, already 17 though she was only 6. But Emma came last. Emma appeared in the doorway still wearing her pink nightgown, the one with the faded unicorns on it, and before Aria could say good morning, the girl ran across the kitchen and wrapped her small arms around Aria's waist. Her head barely reached Aria's ribs. "You smell like cinnamon, Vivi," Emma said, and Aria's chest tightened so hard she thought it might crack. "Good morning, baby," Aria whispered, and she held the girl for 2 seconds longer than was appropriate for a nanny. 2 seconds that felt like stealing. Marcus Lancaster appeared at 7:04, briefcase in hand, already scrolling through his phone. He was a partner at Rothstein and Associates, a man whose suits cost more than Aria's monthly rent, a man whose morning routine did not include looking at the woman who prepared his breakfast. "Tasks," he said, and he placed a handwritten list on the counter beside the eggs. Aria counted without meaning to. 17 items. 17 things that needed doing beyond the children and the cooking and the cleaning and the laundry. 1. Polish the silver. 2. Inventory the wine cabinet. 3. Organize the study. 4. Confirm the catering for Friday. The list continued. His wife, Victoria Lancaster, glided into the kitchen at 7:11 wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than Aria had ever held in her hands at one time. She took a chair at the head of the table without acknowledging Aria's presence. This was the contract. Aria was furniture that happened to cook. "Emma, sit properly," Victoria said, and Emma released Aria's waist and climbed into her chair. Aria plated the food. For perfect eggs, 2 slices of toast, fresh fruit arranged in a small porcelain bowl, orange juice in a crystal glass. The children ate. The parents checked their phones. Aria stood by the counter with her own plate, 1 egg, 1 piece of toast, the rest of the fruit she did not need, and ate standing up because there was no seat for her at this table. At 8:17, the children were dressed for school and Aria was herding them toward the front door when Sophie turned back. "Did you pack my lunch?" Sophie asked. Aria had packed it at 7:30. Turkey sandwich on whole wheat, apple slices, yogurt, cookies. All the things that made a child feel cared for. "Yes, it is in your backpack," Aria said. Sophie nodded once and walked out without a thank you, and this was the way of children who had never had to learn gratitude. But Emma lingered. Emma, 7 years old with dark eyes that saw things other people missed, pressed her small hand against Aria's cheek. "Will you be here when I get home?" Emma asked. "Always," Aria said, and the lie tasted like ash on her tongue because she did not know if she would be here when Emma got home. She did not know if she would be here in 7 days. She did not know if there would be a here at all. By 10:13 in the morning, Aria had completed 6 of the 17 tasks. She was in the study, a room with floor-to-ceiling shelves and a desk that probably weighed 2 tons, organizing papers that the Lancasters would never look at, when her phone buzzed. The text was from a lawyer. Patricia Reeves. The words were small and efficient and they carried the weight of a boulder crushing down. "Miss Sinclair, I wanted to remind you that the final hearing is scheduled for next Friday, December 15th at 2:27 p.m. As we discussed, the judge will require proof of the full adoption fee of $35,000 to rule in your favor regarding custody of Emma Lancaster. Without the complete payment, the court will default to the petition filed by Emma's biological aunt, Rebecca Winters. Please let me know if you have any questions. Patricia." Aria read the message 3 times. $35,000. In 7 days. She had $78 in her bank account. The minimum balance on her credit cards was $3,000. Her car was worth maybe $4,000. The ring her grandmother had given her on her deathbed, a simple gold band with 3 tiny diamonds, she had tried to sell it once, at a pawn shop in Hollywood. They had offered her $200. She had walked out with it still on her finger. She sat on the hardwood floor of the Lancaster study, surrounded by papers that did not matter, and she did not cry. Her tears had dried up somewhere on a Greyhound bus 15 years ago, when she was running from her mother's house and the men her mother brought home and the smell of whiskey and violence that no amount of cinnamon could ever wash away. Instead, she stood up. She finished organizing the papers. She completed task number 7, call the florist about the holiday arrangements. She called. She held on the line. She confirmed the order. By the time she hung up, she had pushed the panic down into a place where she would not have to look at it until tonight, when she was alone on her mattress and it was safe to fall apart. At 2:44 in the afternoon, she picked Emma up from Fremont Elementary School. Emma ran out through the yellow pickup line, her backpack bouncing, and she threw herself into the backseat of Aria's 2009 Honda Civic, the car with 187,000 miles and a transmission that made a grinding sound when she turned left. "How was school?" Aria asked, pulling into traffic. "We learned about ecosystems," Emma said. "And Mrs. Cheng gave us a sheet of colored paper to make drawings about sad feelings. I drew gray and dark blue and black all mixed together." Aria's throat closed. "Can I see it?" Aria asked. Emma pulled the paper out of her folder. It was a churning mess of colors, abstract and turbulent and heartbreaking in the way that children's art always was, because they had no skill at lying yet. "This is for when you feel sad," Emma said, studying the paper like she was seeing someone else's creation. "Colors for sad days." Aria pulled the car over on Wilshire Boulevard, right there in front of a Starbucks and a cell phone store, and she held the colored paper like it was the most precious thing anyone had ever made. She held it like it was a prayer. She held it like it was the last good thing in the world. "Thank you for making this, baby," she whispered. "Vivi," Emma said. "When I grow up, can I live with you?" Aria could not answer. The question opened a door that she had been keeping locked. Through that door was everything she wanted and everything she could not have. "Yes," Aria said finally. "When you grow up, you can live with me." It was a lie and a promise and the only thing she could offer. She drove Emma back to the mansion, parked the car, and walked the girl up the front steps where Victoria was standing in the doorway, checking her watch. Victoria took Emma's hand with the efficiency of someone retrieving a handbag. She did not ask about the colored paper. She did not ask about Emma's day. "I need you to stay late tonight," Victoria said. "We have an event at the club. I need you here until 10 o'clock. "Yes, Mrs. Lancaster," Aria said. "And the silver needs to be polished. It is tarnishing and it is unacceptable." The silver. Task number 1. Still incomplete. At 9:55 that night, after Emma was asleep and the house was quiet and Aria had polished 37 pieces of silver until her hands ached, she drove home through the December cold. Los Angeles does not usually freeze, but something was shifting in the weather. The wind tore through the streets like it was looking for something to destroy, and the sky had taken on the color of old bruises. She parked in the street outside her apartment building and sat for a moment with her hands on the steering wheel. Through the window of her second-floor unit, she could see the light she had left on, that single hanging bulb in her room that was barely bigger than a hallway. She climbed the stairs. She pulled out her grandmother's recipe book from the shelf beside her bed. Red leather, the spine cracked with age, the pages yellowed and stained with decades of cooking. In the margins, her grandmother had written notes in fading pencil. "Add more love, sweetheart" was written beside a recipe for pasta sauce. "This is for when you are lonely" appeared next to instructions for chicken soup. Aria sat on her mattress with the book in her lap and she opened it to a random page. Cinnamon rolls. Her grandmother's recipe. The note said, "Wake up early. Let the dough rise while you dream of better days." She had 7 days. She had $78. She had a recipe book and a colored paper and a 7-year-old girl who believed that love could hold the world together. She did not know that outside this moment, on a deserted stretch of Pacific Coast Highway in the mountains above Malibu, a convoy of black SUVs was preparing to move. She did not know that in 6 hours, a blizzard would seal the highways and trap her on an empty road. She did not know that a man named Alejandro Bianchi, a man with a scar running from his eye to his cheekbone and a coat worth more than her annual salary, was already awake and already moving and already set on a collision course with her life. She only knew the weight of the book in her hands and the impossible arithmetic of 7 days and $35,000 and a girl who could not be replaced. She opened the recipe book. She began to read. The snow stopped falling at midnight. Aria woke to silence. No wind against the windows. No sound of ice cracking on the fire escape. Just the stillness of a winter night that had exhausted itself. She lay in her closet room in the Lancaster mansion and listened to nothing. The radiator had stopped clanking 2 hours ago. The house above her was dark. Mrs. Lancaster slept. Mr. Lancaster slept. Emma slept in her bedroom with a window that looked out onto a garden Emma would never play in because Mrs. Lancaster's rules kept the children contained like birds in a cage. Aria checked her phone. 12:02 in the morning. The weather alert glowed red on her screen, blizzard warning extended. All highways impassable after midnight. Do not travel. She had not seen the alert until now. She had been too busy folding laundry, washing dishes, braiding Emma's hair, helping with homework, preparing 3 meals, cleaning 4 bedrooms. Her phone showed a text message from her bank. Your account balance is $78.43. She closed her eyes. She did not cry. Her tears had dried up somewhere on a Greyhound bus when she was 16 years old, and they had never returned. Today was payday. Mrs. Lancaster had called Aria into her office at 3 p.m. The office smelled like expensive perfume and old money. Mrs. Lancaster sat behind a mahogany desk that cost more than Aria's car. She did not look up from her phone when Aria entered. She simply slid an envelope across the desk. Aria opened it. $2,100. She had expected $2,700. We are cutting your hours next month, Mrs. Lancaster said. Still not looking up. The holidays are expensive. We need to adjust the budget. Aria's hands had trembled. She had folded the envelope. She had said, I understand, Mrs. Lancaster. She had not argued. She could not afford to lose this job. There were thousands of women waiting to replace her. Women with credentials. Women without desperation written across their faces like a map of survival. $2,700 was supposed to help her reach $35,000. But $2,100 meant she had fallen further behind. The math was simple and brutal. $35,000. 7 days remaining. $2,100 in her account. The gap was not just money. It was the distance between keeping Emma and losing her forever. She had driven to the Lancaster home at 5 a.m. She had cooked breakfast for 4 people. She had packed Emma's lunch. Ham sandwich. Apple slices. A note inside, I love you so much it makes my heart hurt. You are braver than you know. Emma was 7 years old. She could not read the message, but she held the note like it was a prayer. At 2 p.m., Aria had left the house to work her evening shift as a delivery driver. 9 hours. Minimum wage plus tips. On a Tuesday in January, tips were thin. People did not think about generosity when the weather turned cold. She had driven her 13-year-old Honda Civic through the early evening, delivering Thai food and Chinese takeout to apartment buildings in West LA. Each delivery meant climbing stairs. Each customer meant a smile that did not reach her eyes. Each tip jar moment meant hoping for more than $2. She had earned $44 in 9 hours. She had spent $5 on gas. At 9:08 p.m., she had left the restaurant and pointed her car toward the highway. The drive home usually took 40 minutes. The route cut through Pacific Coast Highway, up through the mountains above Malibu, down toward Westwood. It was beautiful in daylight. At night, it was empty road and darkness and the knowledge that if her car broke down, she was alone. The weather report had said the blizzard might hit by midnight. Aria had not listened carefully. She had been counting money in her head. The math of survival always louder than any warning. The blizzard hit at 10:15 p.m. like a physical force, like a door slamming shut on the world. Snow so thick her windshield wipers could not keep pace. The white erased everything. The road. The sky. The possibility of forward movement. Wind howled and shook the car. Temperature dropping. 18 degrees. 14 degrees. The broken heater pushed out lukewarm air that smelled like rust. Then the engine stuttered. Once. A cough. A violent shudder. Twice. The sound of machinery choking. Dying. It died. The Civic coasted to the shoulder of an empty stretch of road. No lights. No houses. No other cars. Just Aria and snow and the wind that sounded like something alive and hungry. She tried the ignition. The engine turned over but did not catch. She tried again. Nothing. Again. The starter made a grinding sound and gave up. She pulled out her phone. No signal. One bar appeared. Gone. No bars. The cold was moving into the car now, seeping through the vents, settling into her bones. She could see her breath. She could count her heartbeats. She wrapped her grandmother's recipe book in her coat to protect it. Red leather. Yellowed pages. The only inheritance she had ever received. She held it against her chest. I cannot die here, she thought. Emma needs me. If I do not make it back, who will fight for her? Who will tell her that she is worthy of love? Who will reach for her in the dark? Through the wall of white, she saw headlights. A convoy of 3 black SUVs moving slowly through the storm, almost ghost-like. The lead vehicle passed her. Then brake lights appeared in the snow. Red and blurred. The SUVs reversed. The lead vehicle stopped beside her broken car. A window rolled down. A man with a hard face and eyes like flint looked at her. His name was Bruno, but Aria did not know that yet. He said, "You should not be out here." She said, "My car died." He looked back at someone in the vehicle, someone she could not see. A voice from the darkness inside said, "Bring her." Bruno opened the door. "Get in." She moved like someone in a dream, leaving her broken car, leaving the cold, entering the dark interior of an SUV that smelled like leather and expensive cologne and something else she could not name. Heat flooded over her. She began to shake from the contrast. From the cold leaving her body. From the understanding that she was now in a vehicle with dangerous men, and she did not know why. She sat between Bruno and another man called Nino. In the front passenger seat sat a man in a black coat. His hands were visible on his thighs. One hand wore a silver ring. The other wore a gold watch. His voice came without him turning around, low and controlled like someone speaking underwater. "What is your name?" "Aria Sinclair." "Why were you on that road?" "I work as a live-in nanny in Westwood." "I was driving home." Long pause. The sound of snow hitting the windshield. The wipers moving back and forth. "Home." His voice again. "My room." "A closet." He finally turned. This was Alindro Bianchi. She did not know his name yet, but she would know his face. Dark eyes that had seen things most people never witnessed. Sharp jaw. A thin scar near his left temple, like someone had drawn a line there and it had never quite healed. He was maybe 45, maybe older. It was impossible to tell. His face was not young, but it was not made of years. It was made of survival. He studied her face the way someone studies a map, looking for landmarks. You look exhausted. I work 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. Why? I have $78 to my name and 7 days to come up with $35,000 or I lose the only person I have ever loved. He did not look away. Who? A little girl named Emma. 7 years old. Blonde hair. She loves to draw pictures of houses with big windows because she has never had a room with a window. I have been trying to adopt her for 2 years, but the system does not care about love. It cares about money. $35,000. That is the cost of keeping her safe. Nino shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Bruno's jaw tightened. In 15 years of working for Alindro Bianchi, they had never heard him engage with anyone like this. Never seen him ask follow-up questions. Never witnessed him turn around at all. Where are you going now? I do not know. My car is dead. I cannot afford a tow. I have nowhere to go. He made a decision that would change everything, though neither of them understood it yet. Bruno. Take us to Stellina. The SUV accelerated into the snow. Behind them, Aria's Honda Civic sat abandoned on the shoulder, slowly disappearing under fresh snow. Her delivery shift earnings were in the glove compartment. $44. Which meant she now had $122 in the world, and 7 days to find $35,000 more. What she did not know was that Alindro Bianchi had just made a decision that would destroy men and save lives. What she did not know was that Douglas Hale had crossed a line by threatening Emma, and that there were consequences for crossing certain lines that could not be uncrossed. The wind howled. The warehouse was silent except for the sound of her own breathing, shallow and terrified. Aria Sinclair's eye was swollen shut, the skin around it darkening like a bruise spreading across water. Her throat burned where hands had wrapped around it, fingers pressing down like they were trying to crush her voice into nothing. Blood dripped from her split lip onto the concrete floor, each drop echoing in the cavernous space like a metronome counting down her remaining time. Douglas Hale stood in front of her, his shadow falling across her face like a blade. He was in his 50s, balding, with eyes the color of wet cement. His suit was expensive, tailored, worth more than everything she owned. Behind him, Evelyn Blackwell smoothed her white coat with manicured hands, her smile still in place even as violence unfolded like a flower blooming backward. You thought you could run from me, Douglas said, his voice smooth as venom. You thought that man would protect you. Aria's hands trembled. One of his men held her arm pinned against the cold metal table where they had thrown her. She had bitten the other one's hand when he wrapped his fingers around her throat, felt his skin tear between her teeth, tasted copper and salt. For 1 second, she had fought back. For 1 second, she had been something other than prey. But now she was prey again. Her phone lay shattered on the ground 3 feet away. She had tried to call Alindro when she ran from this place, tried to reach him in the darkness behind the warehouse. The snow had been falling so thickly she could barely see her own hands. Her vision was blurring in and out, her breathing coming in gasps because every inhale felt like swallowing broken glass. You cost me money, Douglas continued. That was a mistake. You do not make mistakes with me. Evelyn's voice cut through the silence, high and sharp like a knife on a wine glass. She is not worth your time, Douglas. End this. We have other appointments. Other women. Aria realized in that moment that this warehouse was not just for her. This was a place where women disappeared. This was a place where desperate people came hoping for salvation and found instead a coffin. She thought of Emma's drawing. The house with big windows. Emma's handwriting underneath in careful letters, I love you, Aria. Something ignited in her chest. Not hope. Something else. Something that had no name. Douglas raised his hand to strike her again, and in that instant, a sound split the night open like thunder. The warehouse door exploded inward. 12 men moved through the darkness in perfect formation, dressed in black tactical gear, their footsteps synchronized like a heartbeat. They moved like ghosts, like men who had done this 1,000 times before. The first man through the door was Alindro Bianchi. He wore a black coat that cost more than a year of her old rent, his face carved from stone, his eyes burning with something that made the air itself seem to ignite. Bruno and Nino flanked him, their hands steady, their faces empty of all mercy. Douglas Hale's entire body went rigid. The color drained from his face in stages, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. "Step away from her," Alindro said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. Each word was deliberate, measured, impossible to disobey. Douglas stepped backward, his hands rising slowly. "Bianchi, I did not know she was." "She is not mine," Alindro said, walking forward with the unhurried pace of a general surveying a battlefield. "She is her own. But you made a mistake. You hurt someone I protect." Douglas's hand moved toward his waistband. Bruno crossed the distance between them in 2 seconds flat, disarmed him with a precision that suggested extensive training, and Douglas collapsed onto his knees. He was trembling now, his entire body shaking like a cornered animal facing the end. He began to beg. "Please, please, I will disappear. I will leave the city. I will leave the country. I will never." "Death would be too quick," Alindro said quietly. "Too easy. Too merciful." Alindro knelt down so that his face was level with Douglas's. Up close, the scar that ran from his left eye to his cheekbone was visible, pale against his dark skin. "You are going to federal prison, Douglas. 40 years. No parole. No plea deals. No mercy. You will spend the rest of your life in a cell, and every single day you will remember the moment you decided to hurt her." 2 of Alindro's men lifted Douglas from the ground as he continued to sob. He was not the monster anymore. He was nothing. He was the future corpse of a life that was already over. Evelyn Blackwell was moving toward the rear exit, her heels clicking against the concrete like a countdown. But Bruno was already there, his massive frame blocking the door. She collided with him and bounced backward, her white coat swinging open to reveal a designer dress worth more than Aria's apartment. "Going somewhere, Mrs. Blackwell." Bruno's voice was soft, almost kind, which made it infinitely more terrifying. Meanwhile, across the city in the darkness before dawn, FBI agents were moving through Evelyn's penthouse with a warrant that had been signed at 5 a.m. They found files. They found photographs. They found the names of 17 other women, each one a story of desperation exploited, of vulnerability weaponized, of survival turned into currency. Evelyn was on her knees now, her hands cuffed behind her back. An FBI agent was reading her rights, and she was laughing, still laughing, saying, "Do you know who I am? I have lawyers. I have connections. My family sits on 3 boards. My husband knows the mayor." The agent's expression did not change. "Your connections just turned state's evidence, Mrs. Blackwell. Your husband signed a deal this morning. So did your father. So did everyone you thought would protect you." She stopped laughing. At St. Mary's Hospital, where they had taken Aria after pulling her from the frozen ground behind the warehouse, the doctor had examined her with professional gentleness. Bruises like handprints. A fractured rib. A concussion. Contusions on her neck. She had whispered to the doctor about Emma, about the Monday hearing, about the $35,000 that now seemed like a fantasy, something she had imagined in a moment of desperation. The doctor had made a phone call. 2 hours later, Alindro Bianchi walked into her hospital room carrying a folder that contained discharge papers and something else. A document signed by a judge at 4 a.m. A document that said Emma Kessler was being released into the custody of Aria Sinclair, pending immediate review of the adoption. A document that said the state of California was dropping its objections. But the judge had also attached a note, written by hand in blue ink, "Tell the girl she has a house with big windows now." Someone very important made sure of it. That someone was standing in the doorway, watching her read the document. Alindro's eyes were wet. Just barely. Just enough that Bruno, standing in the corner, could see it and know that everything had changed. Aria's hand shook as she held the papers. She could not speak. The words were stuck in her throat like stones. "It is over," Alejandro said quietly. "The trial will be in 6 months. Douglas Hale will spend the rest of his life in a federal facility. Evelyn Blackwell will join him. 17 women are being relocated to safe houses and offered counseling. Emma is yours." Aria's tears came then, the kind of tears that erase everything that came before them. She thought of Emma's drawing. She thought of the little girl sleeping in her own bed, safe, finally safe, waiting to wake up and be told that nothing would ever separate them again. "Thank you," Aria whispered, her voice barely audible. "You saved yourself," Alejandro said. "I just made sure they paid for what they took from you." Outside, the Los Angeles dawn was breaking orange and gold. The snow had stopped. The sky was clearing. And in a house with big windows, a 7-year-old girl was about to wake up to a future she had never dared to imagine. 1 year later, and Los Angeles had changed, or perhaps Aria had changed so completely that the city looked different through her eyes. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows in a 2-bedroom apartment on the 15th floor, golden and warm and utterly unlike anything she had ever lived in before. Emma ran through the space laughing, 8 years old now, her hair braided and her cheeks round with health. She had gained 15 pounds since that night on the highway. She no longer woke screaming. She no longer asked why people left. The apartment was modest by the standards of the neighborhood, but it was a cathedral compared to the converted closet where Aria had slept for 3 years. Emma's bedroom had a window seat stacked with pillows. Her walls were covered in drawings, pictures of flowers, a sun with a face, a house with big windows, and one drawing that made Aria's heart stop every time she saw it, 2 figures holding hands beneath an enormous sky. Aria stood in the kitchen wearing a simple blue dress. Her hair was clean and styled. She had gained weight, the kind that came from eating 3 meals a day instead of stealing leftovers from garbage bins. Her skin had healed. Her eyes had stopped looking haunted. She looked alive in a way that seemed to surprise people who had known her before. On the counter lay her grandmother's recipe book, the spine cracked, the margins filled with handwriting in fading blue ink. Recipes for bread and soup and pastries, but also small notes, "Made this the day your mother was born." She cried for an hour, then smiled. Never smile again. Her grandmother had died 23 years ago, but her hands had written these words, and Aria's hands now moved across the same pages. Emma climbed onto a stool beside the counter, her small body pressed against her mother's hip. Aria had legally adopted her 3 months ago. The paperwork was framed on the living room wall. "Can I stir?" Emma asked. "Yes, baby." Carefully. Emma's hands wrapped around the wooden spoon. Aria guided her through the motion, letting her feel the resistance of the simmering pot, the warmth rising from the surface. The kitchen filled with the smell of her grandmother's soup recipe, tomato and basil and something indefinable that Aria could not quite name but that her body remembered from childhood. "This smells like love," Emma said, her voice small and certain. Aria's throat tightened. She kissed the top of her daughter's head. "That is Grandma's secret ingredient. She put love into every pot." The doorbell rang at 4 in the afternoon. Aria was not expecting anyone. She opened the door to find a delivery man in a blue uniform holding an envelope. "Aria Sinclair?" he asked. She nodded. She signed for the package. Inside the envelope was a check for $35,000. And a note written in handwriting she recognized, *, "You paid me back. I never asked you to. A*. Aria's hand shook as she held the check. For 12 months, she had been sending $500 a month to an account Bruno had set up. She had promised herself she would repay every cent. She had promised that she would not be indebted to Alejandro Bianchi, that she would earn her independence and her daughter's future through her own work. She had become a paralegal. She had enrolled in night school. She had written 243 checks for $500 each. She had carried the weight of her debt like an anchor. And he had just returned all of it. She sat on the couch, the check trembling in her fingers. Emma climbed into her lap, her small body fitting perfectly into the curve of her arms. "Are you sad?" Emma asked. "No, baby. I am grateful." That night, after Emma was asleep, Aria stood on her small balcony looking at the city lights. The air was cool. Los Angeles sprawled beneath her, 1,000 windows glowing in the darkness. She thought of Alejandro. She had not seen him in 8 months. The trial had concluded. Douglas Hale was sentenced to 47 years in a federal prison. Evelyn Blackwell was imprisoned in a medium-security facility in San Diego, her entire social network having collapsed the moment her involvement in the trafficking ring became public. 17 women had been relocated to safe houses. Aria had testified via closed-circuit television, her voice steady, her words precise. And then Alejandro had disappeared. She wondered if he ever thought of her. She wondered if he had moved on to other concerns, other crises. She told herself that his absence was a mercy. She did not need a mafia boss in her life. She did not need a man whose world was built on violence and control. But sometimes, standing on this balcony with the city spread below her, she wished he would appear. She wished she could thank him again. She wished she could tell him that his money had helped her enroll in paralegal certification, that Emma had stopped having nightmares, that her grandmother's recipe book was no longer a relic of loss but a living thing, passed from her hands to Emma's hands. She did not know that 3 blocks away, in a penthouse office overlooking the same skyline, Alejandro sat staring at a photograph. Bruno had taken it the night they found her on the highway. Her face was bruised. Her eye was swollen. Her lips were cut. But her eyes were still fighting. Still refusing to break. He had carried that photograph for a year. He had looked at it every night. He had told himself he was protecting her by staying away. He had told himself that his presence in her life would only bring danger, that she deserved to build something clean and untainted by the darkness he carried. But tonight, something shifted. Late evening. Aria stood on her balcony watching the city. A breeze moved through the air, cool and carrying the faint smell of rain. She wore a sweater. Her hair fell across her shoulders. She was thinking of Emma's drawing again, the 2 figures holding hands beneath the sky, when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. Alejandro stood in her apartment doorway. He wore a dark suit, expensively tailored, the kind of suit that made him look like the embodiment of controlled power. But his expression was unguarded. There was something vulnerable in his face that she had never seen before. "How did you get in?" she asked. "Bruno still has the spare key I had made for emergencies," he said quietly. "I did not know you had a key. I wanted to make sure you were safe. Visiting in the hours when you sleep." He stepped onto the balcony, closing the door behind him. "I needed to know you were here. That you were breathing. That you had not disappeared like everyone else I have ever cared about." She waited. The city hummed beneath them. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Because I have carried something for a year and I cannot carry it anymore." His voice was steady, but something moved beneath the surface, like a current underneath still water. "That night on the highway, you saved my life. But you did more than that. You reminded me that strength is not control. It is caring when you have nothing left to give. You fought for a child who was not your blood because love is not biology. I know that now." He turned to look at her fully. "My brother was my blood and he betrayed me. I had to choose between mercy and survival. I chose survival. I have spent 10 years believing that made me strong. But you showed me I was wrong. Strength is not the ability to destroy. Strength is fighting for someone when the world says they are not worth it. You did that for Emma. You did that for me." Aria's eyes filled with tears. "I did not do anything special. You did. You saw a man dying and you did not hesitate. You did not ask his name or his past. You just acted. That is who you are. And I have spent a year trying to convince myself I was protecting you by staying away. But the truth is I was protecting myself. Because caring about someone means you can lose them. And I have lost everyone I ever cared about. She stepped closer. You have not lost me. He looked at her for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. I sent you the money back because you do not owe me anything. You never did. Then why did you help me? Because sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. He paused. You reached out for me. I reached out for you. That is all we can do for each other. She smiled, and in that smile was a year of survival, a year of rebuilding, a year of finally breathing. Emma asks about you, she said. What does she say? She wants to know if you are coming to dinner. He laughed quietly, a sound like something breaking open. I would like that. Tomorrow night. 6 o'clock. Bring Bruno and Nino. They would like that too. He turned to leave. She said his name. He stopped. Thank you. For everything. No, Aria. Thank you. The next evening at 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Emma ran to answer it, her footsteps thundering through the apartment. Alejandro stood in the doorway wearing a dark suit, Bruno and Nino behind him holding flowers and a bottle of wine. Emma threw her arms around his waist. He looked surprised. Then his expression softened. He knelt down to her level. Hello, Emma, he said. I drew you a picture, she said. I would love to see it. Aria watched from the kitchen doorway, smiling, as Alejandro rose and looked directly at her. In his eyes was everything he could not say out loud. In her eyes was everything she had finally allowed herself to feel. And in that moment, watching a man who had built an empire on violence sit on her couch to look at a child's drawing, Aria understood something her grandmother had written in the margins of her recipe book, *, love is the only ingredient that never spoils. It only deepens with time. *. If this story moved your heart, drop a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe because tomorrow we have another story that will change how you see the world. Remember, sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. Be that hand for someone today. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We wish you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and happiness. No matter how hard life gets, remember that after the rain, the sky clears. Goodbye, and we will see you again in the next video.